the final entry in Texas A&M's Virtual Campus Sustainability Month. Thanks to all of you that have joined us this entire time. I definitely recognize some of the names on this call, so thank you so much for your support. We really genuinely appreciate it. So for this final talk, I think we're ending with a bang here. We're going to be learning about the economics of climate change. Manasa and Archer will be leading us on this talk. I think it will be really interesting. We often, we hear a lot about climate change. In the world of sustainability, we hear a lot about environmental issues, but we don't always hear about the economics and how that intersects with the environmental issues, how it intersects with the social issues. So I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to learn more about that. So before we get to that, I just want to go over these quick ground rules here. So first, putting your view in side-by-side mode is going to be the best way for you to view this presentation. So you can just do that in the upper right of your screen, put it in side-by-side mode. Also, the live transcript is turned on, so if you want to view the subtitles, you can enable that feature. Please ask questions. The more questions y'all ask, the better the conversation is going to be at the end. All of our conversations at the end where people have actually asked questions, and it wasn't just me, have been far more engaging. So please help me out and ask some questions. And this is being recorded, so just be aware of that. And this will also be available on YouTube. It'll likely be available tomorrow once the recordings are available. And then you probably are here also because you're interested in some cool prizes. We have those. And you can win those by collecting code words. So one code word equals 1 point, and you can use that to get one entry into the random draw giveaway. And we will have the code words written on a PowerPoint slide. They'll be spoken by one of the presenters, or they'll be written in the chat by me. And you just keep track of your code words. Send them all in one email to sustainability@tamu.edu. You have all the way until October 31st at 11:59 p.m. to get those turned into us. So send that in just one email though. And you can earn up to 5 points per event when you watch live. So today there's going to be 5 code words available. If you watch the recording, you'll get a chance for 1 code word. You can also download the Maroon Base app. So this is separate from our office. It's an app where you can get rewarded for attending multiple events across campus, and you can earn cash prizes. So you can kind of double dip. You can get our code words, you get Maroon Base points. So check that out. Download the app if you want to learn how to utilize that. And to get detailed rules, here's the link. It's on our webpage, sustainability.tamu.edu. You can read everything there. And the prizes, I need to tell you what those are. So you can win a Yeti cooler. You can pick between these two. You can win a GoPro Hero 8. You get to choose either a Yeti cooler or a GoPro if you're the grand prize winner. There'll be 2 runner-up winners that can win a Patagonia quarter zip pullover. And don't worry, participation is the thing we're really after. And all you have to do to get some cool prizes is participate. If you get 2 code words from 2 different presentations, you can get yourself a really nice water bottle. If you get 3 code words from 3 different presentations, you can get yourself a really nice t-shirt. And if you get 5 code words from 5 different presentations or different ways to get code words that we've offered over the course of this event, you get yourself both. So there you go, that's everything. And now I'm gonna stop talking. Manasa and Archer are gonna take it away, and they're gonna teach us about the economics of climate change. So whenever you all are ready.
Can everyone see the slides okay?
I can see your slide and I can hear you, yes.
Okay, perfect. So howdy everyone, welcome to our presentation. We will be discussing the economics of climate change and how much it will cost us. So my name is Manasa. I'm a senior environmental studies major with minors in geography and philosophy, and I'm here with Archer today.
Howdy, my name is Archer. I'm a junior environmental engineering major with a minor in mathematics.
So today we're going to cover 4 different aspects within our presentation. We will first start with a quick climate change overview, which will be followed by impacts in developing regions and then impacts in developed regions. And finally, we will end with some closing remarks. So in regards to climate change, we will first look towards a report that the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released earlier this year. So according to the report, the overwhelming consensus is that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land, and furthermore, there has been widespread changes in the atmosphere, cryosphere, and biosphere. So these changes include a 1.1 degrees Celsius warming since the 1850s, which is predicted to rise to 1.5 in the next 20 years. Sea level rise, loss of sea ice, increased precipitation and heat wave intensity, and large-scale changes to the oceans. So these changes will lead to flood damage from sea level rising and also increased precipitation, infrastructure damage from extreme weather events, a decrease in agricultural production because lands may have severe droughts or be constantly flooded, water scarcity as evaporation increases from rising temperatures as well as sea ice melting, and a plethora of health impacts from climate change.
Yeah, so as previously mentioned, we're first going to be taking a look at the impacts of climate change on developing regions of the world. With that being said, we'd like to first briefly mention that in this section, we're going to be talking about some sensitive subjects. This includes things like death, violence, and sexual abuse. These, of course, can be very overwhelming. So if you feel the need to do so, it's absolutely okay to leave the presentation. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first, obvious question you may be thinking is, where exactly do we mean when we say developing regions? If you're looking for a strictly geographic answer, it's these places you see here, the tropics, Africa, Asia, South America. And there are matters related to geography that make these parts of the world interesting to look at when you talk about climate change. But the real reason that we're focusing on these regions is in how we've been referring to them, that is developing. In this context, development is a multi-factor index which takes into account a number of things, including industrialization, average income, education, and many more. But the main takeaway is that development is just a way to categorize countries by how well they can provide for their citizens. Ultimately, we're using this classification because developing and developed countries are susceptible to different climate change impacts. With that being said, it's important to immediately dissuade any notions of superiority that the connotations of developed versus developing might imply. On the contrary, there's a direct correlation with countries that are developing and those which are victims of historical and modern colonization. So let's get into our first impact, that being water scarcity. Water is a resource fundamental to all life, including our own, but it's one that's becoming increasingly scarce. Already in the present day, more than 1 million people per year across the world die as a result of lack of access to clean, fresh water, or as a result of water-related illnesses. Climate change, unfortunately, seems likely to decrease access to water in developing countries even more. There are a number of factors that are going to likely contribute to this, with the primary one being the frequency of precipitation. So the graphic you see here on this slide displays projected changes to consecutive dry days compared with pre-industrial averages, basically saying, are droughts getting longer or shorter based on where you are in the world as a result of climate change? Brown on this graph represents net increases or longer droughts, while blue represents net decreases or shorter droughts. So what you can see is that equatorial and desert regions are likely going to see shorter droughts, but the tropics and Southeast Asia and China, as well as many other regions, are going to have longer and more intense droughts. This, combined with increased rates of evaporation, as well as the increased storage capacity for atmospheric air, which occur naturally as temperatures rise, will likely decrease access to fresh water throughout much of the developing world. The changes to precipitation, which seem poised to occur due to climate change, have another important, albeit less linear impact, which is disease. According to the IPCC, extreme weather events, including heavy precipitation and flooding, will likely become much more intense and common as global temperatures increase. These, coupled with increased surface water temperatures, have a high correlation with the frequency of insect and waterborne pathogens. Furthermore, water shortages, as discussed on the previous slide, are directly linked to longer and more severe cases of diseases such as diarrhea. While these are relatively minor issues in Europe and the Anglosphere, these diseases represent an ongoing and soon-to-be worsening crisis in the developing world. 15% of all deaths among children in Africa are due to malaria alone. 10% in both Africa and Asia are due to diarrhea. The conditions which create these and other illnesses, such as cholera, dengue fever, and more, are likely to become more common as a result of climate change. Furthermore, malnutrition is another major precursor for disease, which also leads into our next impact, which is food insecurity. Agriculture is often the preeminent economic sector in developing countries, And at face value, climate change could actually be construed as a good thing for this, as warmer temperatures and increased carbon dioxide can actually correlate with greater crop yields. With that being said, the secondary effects of climate change can greatly outweigh this. Extreme weather, wildfires, and disruption of natural ecosystems has a tremendously negative impact on individual crop production. 75% of the world's poor live in rural areas and rely either directly or indirectly on agriculture for their livelihoods. Even if this general trend for yields rises, many individuals do not have the means to persist through a single catastrophic event like a flood or a fire or a drought, which wipes out their farm and therefore their income. Individuals and families who see this lost are going to have to resort to other means in order to provide for themselves. This is unfortunately going to lead to things like increased rates of exploitative or uncredible loans, or they're going to have to rely on assistance from governments, which will be very stretched thin. So the final impact we want to examine for this section is civil instability, or more generally, violence. Violence in the context in which we're talking about it here usually refers to large-scale battles or civil wars, and we will of course be talking about these things, but because of the decentralized nature of developing countries and violence in general, we're going to be placing a greater focus on smaller scale struggles, things like gang violence or conflicts between villages, or even interpersonal violence such as domestic and sexual abuse. A link between the climate and violence is relatively easy to conceptualize when you consider the common factor of the economy. This relationship has already been well documented by researchers. The ways in which the agriculturally dependent people of the developing world are economically vulnerable because of climate change was already kind of discussed in the previous slide, but this information takes a new light when you consider violence. The exact relationship between poverty and violence has been observed in numerous specific instances throughout the developing world. In East Africa, for example, crop failures typically due to drought lead to a significant increase in the rates of local and regional violence. In India, as another example, rainfall or lack thereof is directly correlated with an increase in murders over dowry disputes. Examples like this go on across the world, but the point is it's well established that poverty is a precursor to violence, and when the agricultural economies of these countries are put into jeopardy as a result of climate change, it's easy to foresee violence increasing. Furthermore, the economic connection between the climate and violence is a compelling one, but some researchers believe there may be an even more direct link between the two. Interestingly, even in countries where the economies don't necessarily rely on agriculture, rates of violence are heavily dependent on the climate. Even in the United States, we have a higher rate of assault, domestic violence, rape, and violent crime in general during the summer compared with all other seasons. Examining more than a century of historical data, research has found that an increase in just 1 degree Celsius in any given year in Africa is associated with a 5% increase in the risk of civil war. Although this relationship is still largely underexplored, the uniformity of this trend suggests that there may be a more general link between warmer temperatures and violence.
So now we're going to talk about impacts in developed regions, focusing primarily on the US and Europe, as we're all going to be affected by climate change. First, in the US, if we stick to a business as usual model and make no changes to combat climate change, then in regards to hurricane damages, we will spend a total of $422 billion by 2100. In fact, the damage strikes close to home. In 2017, when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, the economic impact totaled to about $125 billion. This is the second costliest natural disaster in US history, second only to Hurricane Katrina. The economic impacts are likely to grow because hurricane intensity will decrease and cause more severe storm surges, leading to an increase in damages. There are other factors that might change and increase these numbers, and that is first, coastal development and population growth. If there are more people and property in the path of hurricanes, we have more damage. Second, sea level rise. If the sea level rise increases, then there will be a greater storm surge. Now, when it comes to real estate, the US is expected to suffer a $360 billion loss. The areas that are most at risk include the Atlantic and Gulf coasts, especially Florida. The especially problematic part is that mitigation and adaptation efforts for these are extremely expensive in monetary and ecological terms, as building seawalls and raising homes is difficult. Climate change is also going to affect energy sectors and water resources. Climate change will affect demand for energy and how we supply it. Use energy expenditures will be up $141 billion in 2100. The areas most at risk for this are the Southwest and the Southeast. Finally, the US suffers a whopping $950 billion in regards to water. The areas most at risk are the American West. Water trends in the US are expected to change, which will cause severe repercussions on the agricultural industry, causing devastation to water and food supplies. Water demand is expected to increase, causing an even more dramatic strain. Furthermore, water changes will change power plant functioning and reduce their effectiveness, as a large amount of water is necessary for coal, oil, nuclear, and natural gas plants. Droughts will reduce hydroelectric output, and heat waves are going to stress power plants. Next, we're going to cover European impacts. In regards to agriculture, the production and quality of crops are expected to decrease, and currently river floods are the most common natural disaster in Europe. It results in large economic losses from damage to infrastructure and agricultural land. Coastal regions typically are areas that have large amounts of people and wealth. Therefore, the amount of people that are affected by these floods are going to dramatically increase. Climate change will also affect human health and the overall economy. There are a variety of different impacts that could affect human health. For example, there will be changes in the relationship between temperature and mortality, and there will be a higher amount of heat-related deaths. Next, the European overall economy is set to be damaged significantly. For instance, tourism is a considerable source of revenue in Europe. Climate change is expected to alter the amount of tourists visiting Europe. If the climate of the 2080s were to occur today, then there is expected to be a $20 billion euro loss in GDP.
So before we get into the conclusion of the presentation, this is our code word for the session, climate, pretty fitting. I'm sure Ben will probably put those in the chat here soon. But yeah, so we've thrown a lot of facts at you, but ultimately what we want you to remember from this presentation isn't any given, figure or statistic. The point is that you should realize when it comes to the cost of climate change, everyone is going to be collected from. While the impacts can be different based on where or how you live, it's pivotal that we remember that everyone is going to be hurt by this oncoming crisis. It's just as important to understand that this cost is not easy to put a literal price tag on. You've seen the numerous ways throughout this presentation that scientists and researchers believe climate change is going to cause us harm. Many of these things, in developing countries at least, are easy to quantify individually, but as our scope of knowledge increases, so too does the difficulty of isolating the financial loss. Furthermore, it's worth considering what cost in this context actually means. Is the loss we face when domestic violence spikes some ambiguous decrease in productivity? Is a natural disaster only as bad as the drop in GDP that it causes? The threat of climate change is one to our wallets, sure, but more so to our humanity. We say these things not to necessarily dishearten or discourage anyone. If anything, it's the opposite. Our last takeaway here is the one that's the most important, and it's that the worst of this can still be avoided. That's, ultimately why we're having this presentation. Climate change is absolutely a crisis, but it's one with a solution. And the solution is, not leaving the problem for another day. The science is very clear, and the corporations and governments which run our societies need to act. And ultimately that action starts with us. So thank you.
All right, Archer, Manasa, thank you so much. That was a great job. Definitely learned a lot. Definitely made me think about climate change from a different perspective for sure. And hopefully you all have some questions you can pop in the chat here. This is definitely the time to do that. I have a couple questions that I can ask. So one that I was thinking about, and you may have already kind of briefly talked about this, but maybe you want to talk about it a little bit more. But we often hear that like sustainable solutions or like, trying to do things that mitigate climate change or make environmental improvements or things like that are just too expensive. They don't necessarily make financial sense. How would you, I guess, respond to that? That kind of line of thought.
Can I go first, actually?
Yeah, sure. So
Okay.
I guess that, oh wait, did you say you wanted to go first?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So one thing I found in researching, I talked about developing countries in my section of the presentation, and something that's interesting is that when it comes to like adapting to climate change, making like precursory developments in order to, mitigate some of these damages, right? When it comes to developing countries, at least, that's just generally a good way to develop them. Like the influx of money and funds that can come from, intergovernmental organizations like the UN or something that are there in order to, develop them for climate change is just a good source of money for these countries in general. It creates jobs, it builds infrastructure, and those are things that take a developing country and make it into a developed country. So when it comes to, is adapting to climate change expensive? Sure, but everything is expensive. Developing country is expensive. So, you can kind of do both when it comes to that specific circumstance, is how I would respond to that.
All right,
I
thank you,
guess-
Archie.
I guess I can talk about it in more of like a developed country perspective. And that is like, we're currently already spending so much money on like fixing the damage that natural disasters cause. And that's only expected to increase over time. And so it's like, is the money that we're going to pay in the future worth it? Like, if we just don't mitigate any sort of climate change, like it's just going to get more expensive from here on out. So it doesn't make any sense just like throwing away money in the future when you could just address the problem right now. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think like there's a lot of ways you can address that, right? Like you can build in a way that's more resilient to natural disasters, but also I think natural disasters are going to happen regardless of what we do. But what we do know from the sciences is that human activities that are relating to climate change is relating to more intense natural disasters. So the different things that we do to mitigate our impact on climate change as a society, that's going to hopefully reduce the impact of natural disasters, and that's going to end up saving a lot more money. So maybe you invest more into the start of what you're doing, but in the long term it's going to save us a lot of money and make us safer as well, I think, as a world and as a society. Because you mentioned a lot of other things that I think are really scary as well. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the potential for civil unrest. I think we're already seeing so much division politically in our country right now. We've had a lot of kind of really crazy things happen at the kind of political level. What happened at the Capitol on January 6th, something I don't think any of us expected to see. Do you want to say anything more about kind of civil unrest and those kind of possibilities? Is something else we should really be concerned with?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of research done when it comes to civil unrest and the climate with regards to developing countries in particular, just because, they are more agriculturally based, and there is that link between the economy and violence, which I kind of talked about. But you raise an interesting point when you talk about like, we don't live in a developing country. The United States is not an agricultural economy, but we have seen increases in civil unrest. And I think that, not necessarily all of that can be attributed to climate change by any means. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But with that being said, there is some link, I think, between, increasing temperatures and climate change, between the disconnect in how science is presented to people and, politics, right? That's a big issue, is communicating scientific fact to people in a way that they can understand it. They can understand it's not like an accusatory thing. It's not your fault, but this is happening. And so the fact that that isn't there has, I think, contributed in a lot of ways to like the division we have when it comes to climate change, right? Climate change isn't really a partisan issue, or it shouldn't be, but it has kind of become one because of the disconnect between people and the science. So I think it's not necessarily just an issue of like the climate itself causing civil unrest in developed countries at least. But it's definitely an issue for sure. That's not a satisfying answer, but it's the one I have.
No, I mean, that's, I think, a really good answer. And I think you hit a lot of, really a lot of interesting points. Just, just really considering, I guess, our political climate and how you can't necessarily trace things back to climate, but the way you connected that with science, at large. And we've really seen this misinformation campaign happening for a really long time, where you're not, supposed to believe in climate change, but now these strategies have really shifted into all kinds of spheres of life. And it's really been used to kind of divide people. So I think you make a really good point, is how do we get back to believing and trusting in, science that is peer reviewed, that is going through the proper channels and things like that, So I think that's a really, really good point on how that does connect and is leading to more civil unrest, not just related to climate. And I think we'll see when the climate gets more disrupted, you already see people having to come and move and things like that. So I think that was a good point. So we have some questions in the chat here. Do you all feel that water commodification will also be a potential impact of climate change in either developing or developed countries?
So I think that like water commodification in general is just like going to cause like a lot of problems, because as climate change gets worse and worse, there's going to be an increase in water scarcity, and that's going to happen in both developed and developing regions. And so then when you commodify water, you're limiting the access that people have even more, right? And so I think that water commodification, it's like already happening, and I think it's going to increase just because of like the society that we live in, but it's just going to lead to more civil unrest. It's going to lead to more problems within like developed and developing countries, and I think that it's just going to make the whole like water scarcity issue like significantly worse. So
yeah, I agree.
To kind of expand on that, water is already, I think, relatively recently it became, like a publicly traded, future, I think is the term. I'm not entirely sure if that's right. But that's, a big deal. Furthermore, I talked about like water scarcity in developing countries, right? And it's kind of easy to think of it that way, right? But even in the United States, I distinctly remember, I was born in Houston, like for like 6 years or something, we had like a drought, like just a 6-year drought. And of course, that's obviously a major issue in California. You can't use water in certain ways because, we need it to drink, and issues like that are going to be worse as a result of climate change. So, we think of water scarcity as something which can only happen to, countries overseas, but it's definitely a problem, all over the world.
I was going to say that like in the intersection of that and like environmental justice issues in the US, we've seen like things like Flint, Michigan happening, and that's only going to get worse if we don't place policy restrictions on corporations and things like that. So if you have extreme water scarcity because of climate change and then polluted water that you don't have access to, then that's just going to lead to like a whole host of other problems. So
Yeah, I mean, water is essential for life, so I think there's just the moral question is, should we be able to commodify water when you literally have to have it to survive? Need it for anything, for everything. You saw me drinking water just a few seconds ago. So yeah, I think that's it. And you mentioned Flint, and right now I'm blanking on the name of the city, but there's another city in Michigan that is having a very similar thing happening right now, and their community is having to have bottled water shipped in and things like that. And I think it's also a predominantly Black community as well. So, these issues are going to continue to happen. And infrastructure is a big issue. That's something that, right now it's being debated very heavily in the Congress and the Senate, is about this big infrastructure bill. And our water infrastructure is really old in this country. I think there's something that people may not maybe realize. We really have to spend some money on that. All right. And then so in regards of, I think there's a lot of information in this presentation that was, hard to digest. But I think at the end, you mentioned that, we can do something about this. I think that's the message that we ultimately want to get across to all of you, is that there is still plenty of hope. We have solutions. We know what to do. What we need is more corporate and political will to get these things done. And we need people to take action as well. So one of the questions is what would you suggest people do as a first step to reverse impacts of climate change? Because, we definitely need political will and corporate will, but we need individuals as well. that's a huge part of any movement. So what would you guys recommend, or what would y'all recommend to reverse the impacts on an individual level?
I guess I can go first. I think the biggest thing is like research, like understand what's going on. And like part of the problem is that the research that is out there, it has a lot of scientific jargon. It may not be like easily digestible by a lot of people, but there are plenty of resources that you could find that could like help you understand what's going on. And the second thing is that like we as citizens have the power to put political pressure on our representatives and our senators. They work for us, not the other way around. So I think that calling up your senators, calling up your representatives, using the voice you have to put pressure on them will really like make a difference. Because if enough of us do it, then they have to listen. So yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I mean, like when it comes to you as an individual, your emissions that you cause are relatively like nothing compared with, the emissions that a massive corporation like, Saudi Aramco or ExxonMobil, that they have in a single day. Like your entire life is like nothing compared to that. But, like Manasa was saying, the power that we have is, over the political system. And so using that, protesting or, doing what you said, seriously, calling your senator, calling your representative is kind of the best thing I think you can do. Organizing as individuals to create broader change is ultimately kind of how we need to tackle this.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. People power is really the only way we can solve this. And also if you were looking for more of something you could do individually right now, the presentation that we had a couple before this talked about diets for a healthier planet. And if you wanted like probably the single most impactful thing you could individually do aside from political organization, it would be, eating healthier, eating more plants and eating more vegetables and fruits, eating more vegan foods. So yes, great. So then this is just one final question, and I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with this term, but someone in the audience are wondering, have you looked into like mitigation banking at all? I don't know if you all have heard of that term before. Let me first ask you that. Mitigation banking is a potential solution for combating climate change.
So I personally have not looked into it. I don't know if Archer has, but I have not.
All right, well, that's we got stumped on that one. So I'm just new to me, so it's a homework for everyone to look into mitigation banking. Maybe that'll be a future topic, but that sounds like an emerging trend in terms of the banking industry. So with that, thank you everyone so much for participating. We've really enjoyed having all of you. Thank you so much for your time. We hope you learned a lot, and we hope you start taking more sustainable action in your daily lives. And and also I guess the last thing I should say is aside from apply for the internship program, application is open on the 8th, it closes on the 22nd. We'll be campus-wide email, but remember, you can if you've missed any presentations, they're all up on YouTube. The 5 before this are all up on YouTube, and you can get one code word each from there. But yeah, check those out and tell your friends, there's still chances to get in to this drawing and get more entries. So hopefully one of y'all that's been on these calls the whole time wins. Like, honestly, I would love to see that because y'all put so much effort in. But thanks you all so much for participating. We definitely appreciate you. Everyone take care. Bye.